My name is Fran Hanson, and I am involved with many of the strikers, actually, and the sympathizers. My father, Francis Hanson, was one of the strikers. My uncle John Hanson, was one of the strikers. My mother, Ina Hanson, at the time she was Ina Waymanen, she worked in the strike office and did all kinds of things. And then my dad's friend, Bernie Koski, was also involved in the strike. So I know four of the strikers. I had heard, when I was younger, I had heard that both my parents were involved. I'd heard them talking and heard my Uncle John talking about the strike. And then in the early 70s, I was taking a Minnesota history class at Anoka Ramsey Community College. And then one of the days we were discussing the strike, or for a few days actually, probably. And I thought, oh, my parents were involved. So then I went to my parents' home and asked them about it. And then my mother first told me, about her involvement in the strike and what she did and what it was like. And then my father told me about his experiences in the strike, and that intrigued me because I had heard many things about that. I think some of the labor issues were the pay issues, plus I think they had to work many long hours, and that what was one of the things that they wanted to be able to come home to their families instead of working all the time. And that's why the demands, were, we need this union. That's why it was such an important strike. My mother, Ina Hanson, she probably got involved because there were a lot of Finnish people there, and she had known other people that were involved. In February, the coal drivers struck, and that, but then that got settled relatively quick because people needed coal to heat their houses. But then in May and July and through the summer months, then things picked up a lot more, and they could tell it was kind of a different feeling, and they knew it was so important to them. And I think she realized that and stuff, so she spent many hours every day, and she probably even slept overnight there. They had cots and things. She was not married to my father at the time, and she told me that she would work at the strike headquarters, and they would make sandwiches for the strikers, make food. They would make bandages, and when some of the strikers were injured, they'd bandage their wounds. She would also do things like they had like a flyer, and every day she'd distribute copies throughout the community and to let people know what was going on with the strike and what was going to be happening, the next day, as far as they knew. So that's mainly what her involvement was. But she was very committed to the strike, and she spent a lot of time there. My dad would talk about how they would kind of start out at where the farmers market is now today in Minneapolis, and then they'd walk up the streets, and then the police had batons and that, and then some of the other non-union sympathizers would be there too, and they would be trying to block the trucks from coming in with scabs, and So the more people they had, they could effectively block the trucks. So they had many, many people coming there, walking along, blocking these trucks from coming in. And people had, and the police had batons, and some people had baseball bats. Some of the strikers had just sticks and things trying to defend themselves so that they wouldn't get beaten too much. And that, but there was a lot of different clashes at different times, and it was an ugly scene. And they, did what they could, but then there were sometimes, that they would get clubbed or hitten. And I know my Uncle John, John Hanson, he was hitten several times, and my dad said that he was hitten, and several of them. And Bernie Kosky was one of the people shot on Bloody Sunday. They evidently were in a truck, and they came around a corner, and then the police opened fire, and Bernie Kosky was shot in the back. And that really affected my father, and I'm sure John Hanson too. It really affected them because, like, here, they were just strikers, and then it turned ugly, very ugly. And this was such a major strike that I don't think people realize how committed to the union cause these people were, and how they wanted to get their point across. But then, when everything turned ugly, it was scary, and I think my mother had worries about a lot of, like, Francis Hanson and John Hanson, and then after Bernie got shot, they were very scared, but they knew that they had to do it because they were very committed. And then Governor Floyd B. Olson had to call in the National Guard, and it was a major, this was a major strike, and it shut down a lot of things, Because of my parents' involvement, Francis and Ina Hanson, my Uncle John Hanson, and Bernie Kosky, I think because I knew these people, and I was so impressed how they were so committed to the union cause, and how they were so committed to labor, that it's influenced my perceptions about labor, and how in this country they're trying to bust up many of the unions throughout this country, and they have busted a lot of unions. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us that know about the good that unions do. I think that it's very important for us to let everybody else know about this particular strike, how it impacted what came on afterwards, how this brought about more unions, and how all those people in 1934 that were really uncomfortable when they're being hit with the bat or whether they're being shot, and how those people really set the stage for the union movement in Minneapolis and Minnesota.